Introducing our new series of intimate in-person trading conferences in some of the greatest cities in America. It's Market Rebellion Live. Next up, this June in Sonoma County, California. Savor some of the finest wines in America while you level up your trading with Pete Najarian, John Najarian, AJ Monty, Ryan Mastro, and Bill Johnson. Sonoma is limited to just 25 seats to ensure every guest gets personal attention, so act now. Tickets are going fast.
Bang.
You got no clapper?
Well, I got to find where I put it now. Those clappers are pretty valuable, Pete. So,
Jared, the guy's got like 10 clappers. He's got one in every city that he's been to in the last 3 weeks. And he gets back to Puerto Rico. He's got no clapper. What the hell?
You got more clappers than me.
I forget which drawer I put it in.
You know what's going to happen, Jared? He's going to blame you for the lack of the clapper.
I might have to. Well, welcome, folks. You are tuned into the Rebel's Edge. Jared is indeed our producer. He's the guy that does the sound, the video, the graphics that come up on the screen and so forth. And Pete and I give you our take on 4 stocks and then 2 stocks where we have unusual option activity and a little bit of sports thrown in. So welcome to the Rebel's Edge. All right, Pete, macro minute, stocks looking lower earlier, and they've reversed that. The EU markets were sort of slammed a little by that German retail sales figure. So I'm going to say that was why we were negative. And then once we focused in on us, we turned positive.
And when they focused in on us, John, they also were looking at one thing, the 10-year, which had been on a little bit of a run, not a huge run, but a run to the upside. We talked about that yesterday. It was going higher. The market tends to go lower. Specifically, you look over at the NASDAQ, which was off pretty big yesterday. But today it's starting to slip a little bit. Matter of fact, started slipping a little bit. And as we were doing that, the markets just sort of caught on to that, started getting that little scoop up. I agree with you on those retail numbers as well. So there's a combination of things that are really starting to give the market a little bit of a kick, actually, as we get into the afternoon here.
Well, that's it for macro, folks. Now we're going to dive into the trades. And the first one is AI, because this one was up 28% today, up a lot yesterday. It's up 100% for the month of January. And they operate an enterprise artificial intelligence software company. So you get the idea that ChatGPT and the focus on AI has caused a lot of these stocks to go straight up. Many of us would say parabolic.
Yeah, this C3 AI or whatever you want to call it, AI is the symbol and the whole deal, John. It IPO'd at 42, so it's still well below that. It had a nice big spike. You know, the 52-week high is 27, but the high, since it actually became a public company, is 177. So this move is pretty interesting. Yeah, and here we are, and we're pretty happy about the fact that it's about $20 right now. I mean, that's a pretty big run from where it was. But I think people are starting to grasp onto this whole thing, John, more and more. They read about Microsoft and what they're doing in AI. And suddenly you look at this company, well, they've got Google as a partner and they got Microsoft as a partner. So they're piecing this thing together and they could really have a pretty nice run to the upside. They have a great balance sheet when you look at that. This isn't somebody who's got an amazing amount of debt that they're never going to be able to get. And their cash burn's not that bad. The cash burn's about 100 million and they've got about 800 million when you look at cash versus debt. So from that standpoint, this is a company that has plenty of room to be able to navigate themselves in the AI world.
And they're based out there right next to Google, Pete, which doesn't hurt. Also, trades about 2.5 million shares a day for the last 3 months. Today, it's already done 36 million shares. So that kind of tells you a lot about the interest. By the way, BuzzFeed was up 300% last week. They are in the artificial intelligence space, and their trading volume topped almost 500 million shares last week. It's just unbelievable. Anyway, let's talk about Pulte Homes, Pete, because you and I know Bill Pulte, who used to come on the halftime report with us once in a while. And yes, he is an heir to that Pulte legend in home building. Stock was up big today, and it was up 20% on the year, which is pretty darn nice also. They came out with earnings. They topped all the street estimates. And I guess after, they didn't have to cut price, Pete, because even though the sales of homes are down, the inventory is so low that they haven't had to slash and do a fire sale.
Yep, and it's a stock that hit 52-week highs today off of these numbers, but it already was starting to have a pretty good run just in the month of January, John. Year to date, it's a stock that was well in front of the S&P 500. I think it was up about 14% or something. S&P and the Dow up pretty nicely, but not anything close to those kind of numbers. It's a company that absolutely crushed it, though, and they've been doing it for a while, John, and I think a lot of people are probably surprised by that. We all watch the rates. We all understand the housing world and those rates. But when you look at their earnings, John, they've beat 3 of the last 4. And when you look at the revenue, they've beat 2 of the last 4. The numbers look great. Their gross margins actually increased, which I think was probably a bit of a surprise for people. But the looming issue is the Fed, right? I mean, these guys are very dependent on what the Fed decides to do and what pace they're going to continue to raise those rates, right? And that's going to trickle down and affect companies like this. But so far, so good. It's been a nice run. The entire housing industry having a pretty decent run of it so far this year, John.
Absolutely. And I think if indeed the TLT tell that I talked about with Charles Payne yesterday on his show, Making Money with Charles Payne, that implies that we might be seeing a lower interest rate by March, Pete, lower than the 3.5 that we're at now, maybe even down to 3.3. All right. Caterpillar, Pete, opened down $4 and then just kept sliding and was down 7 last I looked from that opening trade. So that meant it was about a 5% loss on the session. Operating margin, 10% versus almost 12%. So why is that? That's because the raw materials that go into making a Caterpillar truck or engine, or perhaps even the big earth movers, that has gone through the roof, and they've had to eat a lot of that price increase.
Yeah, they missed on the earnings, John. They also had some problems with foreign currency. That actually was something that factored in as well, the pressure from that. The full year profits, though, that was at a record. I mean, these guys have been crushing it. And I would encourage anybody to go back and look at Caterpillar. Look at the chart since about October. You're going to be looking at a chart that you're going to say, under any other circumstances, what is this thing? Is it Tesla? Is it, it's literally a straight up line that it's been on in this huge run. Gave back a little something today, but they talked about how bullish they are, John, for 2023 as well. So with its pricing and some of the end user ability to get that to the end user at the right price as well, that combination has really given these guys a nice big boost. I tend to still be very, very bullish on what Caterpillar is able to do.
Yeah, it's a back and fill situation, folks, which means that it, trades down and then it goes right back higher again, trades down a little bit. So it's backing and filling, going from the lower left to the upper right, as our good friend Pete would say over and over again on the halftime report and elsewhere. All right, let's talk about General Motors. GM reported a strong Q4. That helped lift Ford as well. And they employ a lot of people between Lockport and Tonawanda that I saw here, Pete. And they say, wow, $43 billion in revenue. That's just phenomenal. Apparently, GM has figured out one of the keys to making money, and that is higher prices for their vehicles, Pete.
Imagine that. What a novel thought. Yeah, the full year earnings, John, 11 billion bucks. I mean, we're talking about some great numbers here. You got to give Barra some credit because they were struggling for a while. They still need to go a little bit faster, I think, even though they are moving in the EV space in a big way, John. They just continue to push forward with some of the current autos themselves and some of the new ones that are going to be coming out from the EV space. And they're talking about 400,000 of these by 2024. So those numbers are something I think a lot of people are looking very closely at. And oh, by the way, they decided to put $650 million into Lithium Americas. Why'd they do that? Well, it's one of the biggest ingredients that you've got to use when you're talking about the EV space. We talk about copper sometimes, but lithium is another one of those. I think that's a very smart investment, John. The fact that they did do that, $650 million, it's a nice little investment, and we'll see where that goes. But as they get bigger and bigger into EV, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them start to make that an even bigger portion if they can, if they don't lose to Tesla and Elon Musk, who's been way ahead of everybody else on that side of the game.
Yeah. And this was, I think, a very positive move by them putting that money into Lithium America, Pete. And Lithium America right now, LAC, is out there going after lithium supplies and spending like crazy. So General Motors following the hot money. All right, Pete. HYG is my unusual activity today. HYG, it's high yield bond ETF. So, the bonds that people chase when they want that high yield, well, that's what this portfolio is made up of. They traded 33,000 calls. 33,000 calls. I'm sorry, puts. I misspoke. 33,000 puts at the April 74 strike. Now, 33,000, folks, is 3.3 million share equivalent. So that is a very big trade. Imagine 3 million shares plus at 74 bucks a share. Yeah, that's a big trade. You're talking over 220 mil that they would control to the downside in this high yield bond that's trading for 76 bucks. So this is a very big bet. We like following people who make big bets like this. I bought the at the monies, Pete, and I hope to sell the further underneath because these are puts, again, not calls. So when I buy the 76 strike, I will be looking to sell at the lower strikes against it and establishing a put spread to the downside.
That's interesting. I always love seeing these ETFs, John. They come in with some huge size. We've seen a lot of that today. Early on, we saw a lot of that today in the unusual options activity. One of the things that stood out for me, Warner Brothers Discovery, and I've actually talked about this name before, but let me give you a little backdrop onto why, when John and I are looking at a lot of these trades, what makes them interesting? Well, I'll give you an example of this one. They started to buy December 21st. They bought 66,000 of the January calls in WBD. The stock was about 9.25. They came back on the 30th. They bought 10,000 more January calls. At the stock was about 9.25. They bought these son of a guns and they keep on coming after them. John, how about January 4th? 20,000 of the January 10 calls. On January 19th, 2,000 of the February calls. Today, 13,000 of the February 15.5 calls were being bought. Stock now, it's pushing towards 15 bucks. It started at 9.25. It got all the way up to about 12 bucks on January 19th. And now here we are pushing 14.5, 15 bucks. These are the 15.5 calls, 35 cents up to about 45 cents, 13,000 of those. I love the risk reward. And the other side of it is, how about the fact that they just keep coming? Stock was 9.25. Now it's pushing 15. They keep on buying. And that's what we like to see. Some of that continuation of the trade. We love it. I'm in it. We'll see how it goes, but I love what we're seeing. The actions pointing higher.
Fantastic. Well, now comes the portion of the show, folks, for you new viewers, where we talk a little bit of sports. And we're not going to waste your time. We're going to tell you something that you'll hear on ESPN or NBC Sports or wherever you listen and watch. They will be quoting what Pete will be talking about right now. Trust me. 2 or 3 days from now, because we know who you are, producers out there that are watching the show, and we appreciate it. Every once in a while, you could say, well, as Pete Najarian said, or something like that. But maybe, Pete, give us a little bit on what you think of the two gray hairs in the NFL. That would be Brady and Rodgers. What are they going to do next?
Well, and this one, John, actually was submitted to us through my. I have an assistant who does a great job of making sure people know what we're up to, what Market Rebellion's doing, and this, that, and the other. And then she put out a poll. She said, "Hey, what sport would you like to hear discussed, and what topic in that sport?" Well, they immediately went to football, and the topic was, "Will Tom Brady and will Aaron Rodgers be playing football in 2023?" Well, my answer would be yes. I think they will be. I think they absolutely will be. I think they both continue to want to play at the level they are. And if you look at Tom Brady's numbers, despite the fact the team was 8-9, John, his numbers were still pretty damn good. The guy's still right up there. And that was with a team that was really beaten up. Well, I think Tom Brady's going to stay. I think he's going to go to the Raiders. I think because of Josh McDaniels, his old offensive coordinator who was at New England. I think that is going to be an intriguing thing for him. The fact that he's already got a great running back, a great tight end, and a great wide receiver, that doesn't hurt, and a building offensive line that continues to get a little bit better. I think for those reasons, Tom Brady goes there, and we may or may not have talked about this one, but I will tell you, Aaron Rodgers, John, this sounds crazy, but the New York Jets could be a place where he might want to go. You and I talked about them all throughout this past season. Defense is great. They don't have a quarterback. Each week, defense is great. They don't have a quarterback. Quarterbacks are really difficult. They just don't seem to be able to find anybody. Well, Aaron Rodgers could be that quarterback. They got a really good offensive line. They have a running back that they drafted last year who got hurt, who's one of the better running backs that I've seen, Iowa State kid, who had a nice start to this season until he got hurt. They've got a wide receiver that a lot of people think might be one of the best receivers in the game, and they got a pair of tight ends. So when you look at the whole picture for Aaron, if he wants to make a run towards the Super Bowl or MVP, as people always kind of criticize him about, because he brings it up that he's got multiple MVPs, he's got the right guys around him. So what do you think, John? Will they retire? And if they decide to play, where are they going to go?
I agree with you. I don't think either will retire. I like the Brady call, although I think you could easily plug Aaron Rodgers into that same situation, Pete. And I think the two teams that I would say, even I agree with you on the Jets, but here's what I'll say. You could put either Brady or Aaron Rodgers on the San Francisco 49ers or the Vegas Raiders, either of those two teams. And I would say both of them could play either place. Now, if you had one at San Francisco and you're trying to bring along that young quarterback that you're developing, and no offense to Purdy, and I hope the kid's okay, but I don't think he's the one that they're developing, Pete, even though he had great stats and all the rest through the season. Maybe they do. But I think that he would be either Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, a great person for the young guy to learn under. I think they finally do trade Garoppolo, and there's just been too many injuries there, Pete. That's been the knock on him, while he's been there, is the poor guy does do a lot of winning, but then he does get hurt, throws some interceptions. I think Tom Brady, either to the Raiders or Aaron Rodgers to the Raiders, and the other one goes to San Fran because San Fran's got all the pieces. They just lack the quarterback. That's it.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, John. I don't disagree with you. I just don't know if it's so complicated at San Francisco to figure that whole thing out, because you've got Trey Lance, who's going to be costing a lot of money. Then you've got Jimmy G, who's probably going to go somewhere else. Then Purdy, like you say, with the injury, is he going to be okay for the season? There's a lot of reasons. And both those two players we're talking about right now, they're both from the Bay Area, so that it all makes sense that one of the two of them could end up there. It's just the complication of all those different salaries and those kind of players all trying to figure it all out. I think that makes it tough. By the way, the guy who sent that, Tony Pot of Coffee, he's at Pot of Coffee. He's a great guy. I've seen him on Twitter for a long time. That's who responded to Pete's assistant on what they wanted to hear. So if you want to do it, Go at Pete's assistant. Don't go at me. Go at the assistant. She'll do a great job. All right, John. Number 2, halftime. The biggest thing on the planet, other than the Super Bowl itself, is the halftime, right? Everybody waits. Everybody's excited. They announced it long ago, and they did. And Rihanna is going to be this year's halftime performer. And there's a possibility that Drake shows up or somebody else. I don't think she needs anybody else, John. I actually was looking up a few things about her before we got into this conversation. And well, she's worth about estimated 1.4 billion. So I think she's figured out how to entertain and do it in a big format and do it the right way and everything else. And she's really done well. Here's an interesting thing for you as well, John. So there was a poll out there. Christina Aguilera, Britney Spears, Nicki Minaj, Ariana Grande, Taylor Swift. By the way, Taylor Swift, 3% of the vote. Christina Aguilera, 30% of the vote, wanting her to be there. So gives you a little bit of a sense of that. But how about the fact that the top 5 are all women? I mean, I thought that was pretty interesting as well. So we'll see how it plays out. I personally would like to go to either Justin Bieber Fever and see what he could do up there, because that guy's got a lot of talent, a lot of songs. I think he'd do all right. But I'm more of a country guy, so here's my list that I'd kind of go through, John. Miley Cyrus, believe it or not, that woman entertains. I mean, she will get it done. Carrie Underwood, she's always amazing. Maybe Luke Combs, maybe Morgan Wallen. I don't know, but I'm a country guy, so that's the direction I'd go. So who do you have as yours for next year's Super Bowl? Not this one. Uh-oh, what has he got? All right.
Well, Pete and I did not discuss this, folks, but I said there's nothing more all-American than football, and there's certainly no music that reaches broadly across America more than country. So I'm right there with you, Pete. Obviously, it wouldn't be all these guys, but Eric Church, Luke Combs, Luke Bryant, Chase Rice, and Kane Brown. And obviously, I agree with you. I like Lainey Wilson a lot. I like Carrie Underwood. And obviously, you're not going to have 8 people there, because that was kind of a fire drill last year with Dre and Snoop.
They have like 8 rappers.
Yeah. So I would say you take any probably 3 or perhaps 4 of the names that Pete and I mentioned, it would be one of the most watched Super Bowl halftimes. Again, because the NFL kind of, shot itself in the foot with a lot of the protests and the kneeling and things like that. And the country singers out there would be something that would reconnect the NFL, Pete, in the same way that college football is connected to all of that. So those would be my picks. I could see them just blow the roof off out in Glendale, Arizona, because I think it's in Glendale, not Scottsdale, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So those would be my picks. By the way, my daughter's going to be working out there, working at the Super Bowl with Pete, and I have a friend, Kristen Kaliga of Vanguard Sports. We'll have her soon on a Rebel's Edge extra, because she represents the likes of Vaughn Miller and a whole bunch of big stars in the NFL, Major League Baseball, and the NBA. So my daughter's working out there for her, Pete, for the Super Bowl, and that should be fun. I can't wait to hear those stories. But I will be watching from home with a big pot of chili, and I'll put up the recipe next week, because I always make about 20 pounds of chili, Pete, for the Super Bowl.
I'm guessing there's going to be some tequila, some margaritas, some beer, and a few other items in there too.
There will be. There definitely will be. So, folks, thank you for watching. Make sure you send us your best chili recipes. To at Pete Najarian or at John Najarian on Twitter. And maybe I need to add that to the chili pot. Maybe we'll send a winner a t-shirt, a special t-shirt from Market Rebellion. Thanks for joining us, folks. Have a great day. We'll see you at 1 p.m. tomorrow.